Welcome back to session 2. We are dealing with the sensations and gateway sounds to develop aggressive vocals. We talked about warm-ups and preparing your voice to deal with some of this stuff. And now we kind of get into the meat of why many of us are here. What's so awesome about this section for me is that, both of you are incredible clean singers. There's a lot of challenge in like developing a really good, clean, agile, interesting, clean voice, and then also having that incredible grit, blood-curdling screams, lows and highs, all that stuff. So I'm really excited to learn from you and see how you've gotten there. So let's start by exploring some of the sounds and textures that we'd like to get and watch you execute and put those in.
Yeah, so a lot of this first part here is dealing with sort of like vibrational control and dynamics within still your singing tone. And then from there, with understanding how to control those vibrations and the movement and what movement creates what sound, we can kind of segue into creating these different harsher textures that we might want to create in the future. So when it comes down to like the whole spectrum of the singing voice, there's different things we can do, from falsetto to a big clean sound to adding that heat to your voice. These are the things that we like to kind of pull in and out of as we sing, and we don't necessarily want to just sit in one texture. I don't necessarily want this phrase to be entirely falsetto. I don't necessarily want this phrase to be to have heat applied to it the entire time. So we can kind of duck in and out, and that's kind of what we were referring to before, is like just pinging those different areas, notes, and textures of the voice. So if we start with the falsetto, that is a very forefront area. And a lot of people associate falsetto with like high notes, but that's just sort of this myth floating around. You can hit falsetto in a low tone, or a low register, I should say. Whatever you have available to you within your range, that is accessible with falsetto. That's accessible entirely clean. That's accessible with heat on it. So you can kind of take that siren exercise that we did before and work it out through all these different textures. So that way we can get comfortable using that falsetto texture in any arrangement that we want, even if we're singing a low point. So if you want to reference the sort of chilled out section in Mikasa, unlike the stones, I can sing that chilled out in a falsetto, and with what's happening with the instrumental, I'm catering to it. Instead of having this chill, calm instrumental, I don't really want to sing over that with like this big, unlike the stones. It's just going to stand out too much, and it's kind of going to sound like this sore spot, like this blemish over this beautiful, chill musical piece. So you're able to match that with these different textures that you're using. Whereas if you take the chorus, for example, aggressive, powerful, you have distorted guitars, you have Sam slamming on drums, very aggressive. So that's when you add that heat back into your voice. Unlike the stones. I'm not going to sing that. Unlike the stones.
It's not going to cut through. It's going to sound flat.
And again, it's going to sound like this blemish. Like, why is this fool singing gently over this aggressive piece? So when you utilize these different things, you can start to cater to the music more.
Awesome. So when you're beginning to make that transition from the falsetto, the calm, the purely clean, and then starting to add heat, how can we work that into the voice in a safe and attractive way? Sure.
So I like to start at just one pitch and something that's very comfortable for you, and then again, something we touched on a little bit earlier is just moving that vibration forward and backward and finding what that's going to do. So if we just take this pitch, for example, we have this big, clean chest voice, right? And if we move it forward, we'll slide it into falsetto. And you can see I kind of bring the jaw up to narrow that passageway. That's going to bring the tongue positioning up, and it just moves that vibration towards the very forefront of your face.
and I am. I'm visualizing it going forward. The resonance is transferring forward, and that's changing my vocal positioning, my primary chord positioning to accommodate that.
Mm-hmm. And we can add this into a phrase very subtly. So we can, maybe we want just this section to kind of flare out and be this falsetto. So we can go from a falsetto into a big chest note, then back into falsetto. We can apply heat to it later. So you don't just have to sit and like block them off like they don't work well together. You can integrate it into one voice. And an exercise we can use to do that is simply, again, holding out a note, maybe moving the note up and sliding into falsetto as we do that. Whoa, whoa. So this way, you're not only changing the texture that you're applying, you're changing the note as well. So your body gets used to doing both of those things simultaneously. Whereas before, we were sitting at that one pitch, trying to figure out how to move the vibration, because that can be a little bit difficult. Once you get that down, you can start to add that dynamic where we're changing the pitch, we're changing the texture to match it.
And breaking is fine. Like,
it'll happen. Sometimes it sounds good, and you might do it on accident and be like, actually, that
happens
that
a lot with me. Like that break kind of always, like, I'm not as good as smoothing out that transition like you guys are.
But that also,
yeah,
that exercise will certainly help. And you can do it the reverse. You can go down. A lot of times you bring closure to a line by bringing the scale down, and that's a lot of times how we'll end a line. So you can add like this, you can kind of finesse it a little bit and change your texture to also match the closure, to bring closure through the tone that you're using.
So like, so you're thick and
yeah, like yeah, like
I'm actually in falsetto lower there.
Yeah, exactly. So if we wanted to bring closure to a line, whoa, and just fade it out kind of manually.
Whoa, whoa.
And that goes back to the whole misconception of, oh, falsetto needs to be higher.
No,
like you're using it as a lower texture there.
Yep. And you don't utilize falsetto to hit higher notes. You can hit that note with a big chest.
I can actually sing. I can actually sing higher in my chest and head voice than I can in falsetto. Isn't that weird?
That is. It is. It's weird, but it makes sense the way you utilize support and the way you've discovered the resonance blending.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. Okay, so I love this because we've started with an exploration of what it means to be clean. So now as we bring that back, like you're saying, then we start to realize the heat. We've realized what needs to happen to be clean and maintain that. Now we're going to add the concept of heat over the top of that. Bring us there.
Sure. So if you want to start with maybe a sound effect that kind of replicates that sound. So I tell a lot of my students, like buzzer beater shot, right? It has a lot of distortion, a lot of heat to your voice. So if you can create that sound, that's a good starting point. And then what you'll find is if you move that back, the note gets disguised more and more. The further back it goes, you get more texture, less audible note. So there's this whole array of sounds you can make in this one texture alone. It's not black and white. It's not like I have this grit and it sounds just like this and only this and it's just this narrow movement. You have a whole lot of area in the back of your head you can place that vibration and find the sweet spot. You know, do you want it to sound melodic with just this aggressive texture on top of it? Or do you want to disguise that note and just have this brutal texture coming through? So
if I'm blending what you just did with the consciousness of falsetto and placement forward and back, it might sound like to do a note. Oh, oh, oh. And as I go back, I definitely feel like I need to engage my support more. And we hear that the primary chords start to disengage. But what I also feel the tendency to do as I move back and engage that sensation, it's easy to let myself drop that engagement that I feel in my throat too low and get this tickly, choky feeling. right? Like, and that, I mean, it does it. Instantly feels like it dries out your throat.
Mm-hmm.
But if you leave it high, so it's back but high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes think about it like visualizing the top of the vocal tract doing this, and creating a compression. And at the same time, I love your visualization because bringing it back at the same time helps you discover that range that you have accessible to you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge because so many vocalists think about dirty, clean, and they separate
And they
them.
separate them, yep. And it's really all one fluid voice. And it's not going to necessarily happen overnight. But, you know, you want to discover each area and then get them to blend well together. And these exercises where we're talking about fluctuating back and forth with the vibration, that's the type of exercise you can use to get them to blend together.
So walk us through a couple of those transitions into like a real, you know, loud, developed scream. Not a low one, but a high one that's maybe focused around that, you know, like take us from there to into falsetto, back to your supported chest note, and then into like the blood curdling thing.
Okay. So yeah, we'll just move the note up. We'll just hit a higher pitch, and then we'll fluctuate forward, hit that falsetto, and then we'll just come back, and you'll see how it sounds.
Oh, so the pitch was completely gone when you went back.
It's very disguised.
I heard,
you can
I heard
still
it. I heard it. I heard
a
it was almost like
little
a
bit.
falsetto tone.
Yeah, it's just
okay.
it's just
overtone.
varied, and it's not falsetto because falsetto again is at the forefront. It's just
just that higher note.
It's just succumbed by this aggressive texture,
Yeah.
and that's what people refer to it a lot as like or screaming, right?
That's that's how I do all my screaming is like that.
You have a note in there, and it's still audible.
So critique what I'm doing based on what you just did, and let me know if you hear or see anything different in that approach. Like,
I mean, that's how you would apply that exercise, like textbook. You know, as long as sounds like I can tell by the volume that your core's engaged, so you're not giving up there. Your breath support is obviously there due to the core doing its job properly, and the fact that you were able to sustain it and actually work through the exercise. But that's it. If you continue to do that, that transition just smoothens out more and more, and just kind of becomes more seamless for you over time.
so it's about developing the muscle memory and really working that. One thing that, you know, that we've talked about before in terms of the difference in timbre of screams, and I hear it in your voice too. When I do that, and then try to move that around, like I feel like there's maybe more note, it's more broken up. And Spencer helped me quite a bit with the idea that, you know, focus on the compression aspect of it.
The more you compress, the more that breakup, the more that heat is going to be in there.
And it can be controlled.
Yeah.
So you won't have this breakup, and then all of a sudden there's like this weird dip in it where it kind of goes away. Like the issue I was sort of having yesterday when my voice was sort of falling apart, especially on R's. All of a sudden that breakup just sounds wrong. It's not as consistent. You'll see it in the waveform too. You can visually see the wave and be like, that's not looking right.
So what would you say to the texture that, you know, what would you say to develop that into more of a pure, like, it still feels, I like the sound, but it's...
You have that note in there, whereas he has a lot less of that or none.
Yeah, how do I get to that more pure scream? That
it's the same movement, bringing it back a little further, maybe open the jaw a little bit to kind of just add more volume to it. Because as you bring the jaw down, you'll likely notice that it'll get louder because that passageway is more open.
I feel like when I do like death growls, it is that, and like that note's like on like the like that. Like, is that like the kind of the same placement? Like
That's about as far back as it goes, right? So you're so far back to where there's almost no note in that.
There isn't.
You know?
and that's the technique. I'm not as developed with it, but is that the same?
Mm-hmm.
So work that into the progression of, you know, forward falsetto into chest, into the like work that into the whole thing.
So if you wanted to start all the way back,
wow. Yeah, do it a few more times.
kind of breaks up there at the end there.
It takes a lot of air, especially when you move it down that low.
Yes.
Like there's way more air going through your larynx than there is when you
all the way to the back. It's just so much air and very little controlled note. And so when that's why I start there, because at the start it sounds great. It breaks up exactly how I want it to. By the time I move forward, I'm doing okay. But by the time I get it back again, my body's like, bro, you gotta give it a rest. But yeah, it's just it does take a lot of air to really kind of minimize that note almost entirely and just pass almost just solely that texture. It's almost like a sound effect at that point.
So it takes more air, and I noticed though also that your body language is, I mean, you're compressing more air when you are in that low state, and even in the scream. Because I can see, you know, your stomach muscles go in. You're not tensing, but you're more intense when you're doing that low sensation. Talk about though the placement here, because a lot of people, when they get, particularly those low growls, it's almost like the sensation is placed too close to their primary chords, and then you get that coughing, the tickling, and I refer to this in some cases as like Cookie Monster. What you're doing is not Cookie Monster. If I were to try,
I mean, it's the same placement.
It is. The placement's
exactly
the same
placement.
It's the power and the control of it.
Well, that's different than what I'm calling Cookie Monster. Because that is the frustrated teenager, right?
That's the placement. It's the same kind of Cookie Monster sound. It's just, I guess, maybe more relaxed, and that's why you're not getting that like weird kind of breakup you're talking about.
It's not.
That's
here,
that comes from straining the Cookie Monster sound. I feel like.
So what am I doing? So this sound, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what I'm calling Cookie Monster, and that's why terms kind of suck. But what I'm calling Cookie Monster is not that. I'm calling Cookie Monster this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that to me, that's, I mean.
Oh, that sounds painful.
Right, so if I try to take that loud,
see, there's the note in there.
That's almost this froggy, like, oh, okay, everybody. Like, that isn't the gateway to this.
No, okay,
like,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that's a different placement. When I go, like that, it's that grid is low and not enough high.
Yeah.
And so it's really important while we're doing this that we take inventory to make sure that all of this engagement, whether you're singing, yeah, getting it that, or and doing it low, that the neck engagement, the false chord area engagement is kept high and doesn't go down to and you're not pinching it off.
This area here is never going to help you with volume, ever. It's not what it's for. It's to simply create the pitch, and that's pretty much it. That volume comes primarily from the core. So if you're exercising like what's referred to as the fry technique, and a lot of people start with a very simple sound effect, yeah. If you're gonna get that to none of that. This area feels basically the exact same. There's obviously there's more air passing through it, so that sensation is intensified. But the overall engagement of it is the same. It's from here, and then obviously, as I mentioned before, bring that jaw down a little bit, because that naturally helps that decibel level. The other thing when we talk about like change, because no one really wants to sit at like one register forever. You're always trying to change it. So we kind of talked about earlier that visualization of plant the tongue, move the back up and down with singing, and that's going to help you like unlock that higher register.
I feel like for me also, like opening the mouth more and then closing it off more. Maybe that's happening unintentionally, but that's how I get my like lower and higher registers locked in and
sure.
Like the
Yep. But you'll notice if you do that same thing but singing, the same mechanical movements will create the same outcome. Whoa! Whoa! whoa, whoa. So the same movement is going to move you up as it will downward, no matter what technique you're applying.
But the textures that you're applying in terms of grit are vastly different.
That's the placement forward and back.
So you got the placement forward and back, and you have pitch, which is a different
That's up and
aspect
down.
of that, right?
Yeah. And the tongue is going to help move that up and down.
Huh.
Interesting.
So, oh man, see, it's hard for me to go from, oh, there, I did it. I brought it. I can go that direction well. Ah, okay. So it's just a matter of getting that feeling and working that out and developing the muscle memory over time.
Yeah.
It's important to note that this is not just like you heard me do what you did in a far less developed way. Now I need to take that and regularly
apply the exercise.
Regularly apply
on
it.
a daily basis.
And then over time it develops into that thicker sound that you guys get. And I think that's the key that I have to remember, that everybody has to remember. This is an overtime thing. You guys have been doing this for 10 plus years.
Yeah, I didn't sound like this at all when I started.
definitely not.
It was a lot of like choking, ruining my voice. So when I say every day, I'm talking like 5-6 days a week.
But not overdoing it.
That rest time is important.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe like 10-15 minutes a day or something.
Yeah, to start out, yeah. Sometimes it's less than that. I mean, sometimes it's like you perform one scream and it's like, well.
Oh, that didn't feel right. Let's come back another time.
Yeah.
But I get a lot of like, well, you know, it's straining, like I feel a lot of pressure and it hurts, and am I doing it wrong? And it's not necessarily that you're doing it wrong, it's that you're overdoing it. You don't want to get to the point where it's sore or it hurts. You want to stop before that, because once you get to that point, it's likely you're going to need too much rest time. And then all those benefits that you would have had, that progress you would have made, it goes away. You don't get that progress because you had to take too much time off. 2 to 3 days is about the max you want to take off. And when you start to feel it, right when you start to notice something's getting itchy or dry, that's a telltale sign that I'm good for the day. Maybe it was only 15 minutes. Maybe you're so new, you screamed one time, you're like, whoa, take the next day off.
Even for me, like I've been doing this, like you talk about 10 plus years. If I don't sing for a month and then I go into the studio and start trying to sing again, like dusting those cobwebs off, dude, like 2 minutes.
Yep.
And my voice is dried out. I'm starting to get that like tickly, crackly feeling. And I'm like, okay, I better go warm up more, you know, and like ease back into it.
It's never a permanent thing. You know, I can't rest for a month and come back and be like killing it. It just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work.
So that's a really important thing, I think, to reinforce, is this idea that if as you're learning this and you get burnt out quickly, certainly there is an aspect of doing it wrong and discovering how to do it right and place things.
It creates frustration because you want immediate results, and how are you going to get immediate results in 5 minutes? But just understand that 5 minutes is 5 minutes longer than the last day, and then you reach to 7 minutes. And I do it a lot by songs. Today's goal is one song. Take a break. If I'm feeling that there's wear and tear there, I got 2 days off minimum. Come back, do my scan of the voice. Am I 100%? Is this a good day to rehearse? If so, all right. Let's do that one song again, see how I'm feeling. Do I feel much better? Did it sound better? Did it physically feel better? If so, I'm going to throw another song in there. And then maybe after that second song, I'm feeling a little burnt. Maybe in the middle of that second song, I'm feeling a little burnt. Probably a good time to call it a day.
So there's the aspect of you are not doing it wrong, but doing it too much.
Overdoing it.
And so your mental state could be, oh, my voice is fried after 5 minutes. I must be doing it wrong. No, my voice is fried after 5 minutes. Maybe I'm doing things right. I just need to learn the vocal budgeting aspects so that I can continue to go. Or my voice is fried after 5 minutes. I feel like maybe I'm doing things wrong. I need to take a break. I need to rest, and then revisit it after I feel like I'm back to full capacity. That right there is a very like introspective thing, right? You're asking yourself, why is this not working? Is it wrong or too much? Wrong or too much? And I think you constantly need to be asking yourself that, and nobody else can really tell you wrong or too much. It's about learning to listen to your voice. And this really goes not only for screaming techniques, but really anything.
Absolutely.
With and you could probably speak into this way better than I could, but you get done with 3 or 4 nights of really exerting in a singing way, and your voice is tired. It doesn't mean you sung incorrectly. It just means
no, too much. I mean, I use the example of like a bodybuilder going into a studio, or going into a gym. Not a studio, sorry.
I'd love to see
A bodybuilder going into a studio, going into a gym and deadlifting 350 pounds the proper way. They're going to wear their muscles out, right? Like, you're not going to tell them, oh, don't do that, it's improper. Because they're using proper technique, they're tearing their muscles in the right way for growth. But too much of that is it's gonna hurt them, right? Even if they're using the perfect technique.
And what happens? They take too much time off. They come back. They want to lift 350 pounds, but they got to reduce it down to 325 pounds because that time off is crucial. I build it into my week. And when I say try to get to 5 days a week, you might not be able to do 5 days a week right now because of that much needed time off. Maybe you're only able to do 2 days a week, but it's just that constant building and progressing and adding in more time. 5 days a week for 5 minutes. 5 days a week for 20 minutes, or maybe you're at 2 days a week for 2 minutes, whatever the case might be. Note that, write it down, take a mental note, whatever the case might be, and remember those time frames, because whether you're able to sing for 5 minutes or an hour, you're going to get fatigued doing it correctly. It doesn't matter. So you might be just as frustrated after an hour because your voice is giving out as you were a month ago at 5 minutes, but just remember to look back and be like, but I'm at an hour now. That's great. That is amazing progress.
Yeah, even if you're using perfect technique, like you're not going to be able to go all day. Like you're going to hurt yourself if you're doing too much of it.
So learning that balance and being patient with yourself as you get that balance, and at the same time being patient with yourself as you create and develop these sensations and sounds like we talked about. I want to transition a little bit because we're going to talk more in the next session about developing regular practice routines and mindfulness around that. That's kind of our third session. But I want to transition to the fry, false chord, the terminology and the execution of those things, pros and cons of each approach. We've talked about this stuff already in the demonstrations that we've done, but not by name, not by terms. But these terms are out there, all over the place. And in my experience, the descriptions that we just talked about, where we're not saying that we're not categorizing this type of scream or this type of scream, is more helpful, because we're talking about placement, resonance, up and down, forward, back, and we're helping people discover things based on how it should feel versus calling it something. And I don't know, walk us through the tying in of what we've already done to what you understand those terms to be.
So a fry, for example, is it disengages the note. The note is just kind of lost. It's not really something, you might say it's not even there. It's just this pure texture, and I refer to it as more of like a sound effect. Now, the false chord technique is where we have that note that's audible and you can hear it, and it tends to be louder, tends to be more abrasive. That's kind of the con of it. It can be more difficult to enunciate. You might have to stress the enunciation over time more with the false chord technique, whereas a fry, a lot of times the enunciation comes out very clearly from the get-go, which can be certainly it can be a benefit. Also tends to be far less abrasive. So if you're having a hard time trying to figure out where to start, because both of these techniques are abrasive and are going to accumulate wear and tear more times than not than just singing will, start with the fry, because you might be able to withstand it longer, and then from there work into the false chord technique. So exercises like
So that would be the term
fry. That's what people likely or usually refer to as the fry technique.
Because there's no note. Okay, so give us more of that in different parts of your range.
Sure. So if we want to utilize the fry technique in a high, it's pretty quiet. A mid is going to sound more like
So even the lows are fry. If we're using,
you have everything.
That's all fry.
all
Okay.
fry.
So what would then contrast that with the false chord family?
Sure. So typically going to be a little bit louder, and you're going to hear like the actual pitch in it. Hey! Hey! So like my voice, Lukas, is coming out. It's not as much of a sound effect. You can hear my voice, and it's almost like more personal. Whereas like false chord is going to sound vastly different between vocalists because you hear that voice. So his fry.
That's funny how
false chord.
that's funny how you used hey. That's like how I always kind of tell people to get into that false chord type of scream, like because you can throw a hey hey, and then if you want to get that real engagement going, hey hey yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like
an easy way to get
actually yelling.
And it's Spencer all day long.
Yeah.
Like he's not going to sound like me doing it. Whereas if we're all three of us sitting here doing more of a fry technique, we'll sound far more similar than we would in the false
you
chord
get a lot
technique.
more of your own individual voice when you're using that false chord type.
That's because your voice is actually truly coming through. Another great way to get into the false chord is like rage. Think of rage. Like you're just building up to destroy something. Yeah, like you are physically exerting that aggression.
You can hear the note in there. Like if you took that away, like you'd be the
Like that, yeah. There's definitely I think what needs to be said at this point is that both techniques utilize the false chords. They're both utilizing your upper throat area, that false chord area, in order to create the non-vocal chord.
Right, what you're getting at is like the fry is just kind of the term to describe what's going on with that technique.
The fry is describing the fact that we don't have a note, right? We have loose primary chord engagement. We don't have a note. Whereas the false chord, we do have a note, which means we do have primary chord engagement. But both fry screams and false chord screams are utilizing the same area of your throat, of your neck, your false chords, and the associated cartilages around it, to create that grit, to create that breakup. And I think that by stopping at fry scream, false chord scream, that's totally fine to do as long as you understand what that actually means. Oh, we're not using our false chords in a fry scream. Patently false. It's really describing what the primary chords are.
How they're functioning.
Yeah, with their role in the sound. I love how you broke it down in terms of note, no note. It seems like, at least in my mind, to be able to say, give me a pitch scream versus a no pitch scream. And then the range that you can have there. One of the things, though, that I've heard you guys do a ton is this idea of you're starting with a note, and I mean, you do this so well. You start with a note, and it's relatively clean, maybe a little bit of heat on it, and then you transition into removing the note. Like, I mean, on Crush, in the mind, and I still have a little bit of a note in there, but you're able to transition into complete disengagement of the primary chords.
I'm using like the shape of my mouth to keep it high, like to transition from that higher note. And the might! And the might!
And there's still pitch in there.
He's got the note, but it's so just succumbing,
It's buried
overwhelmed by
by
that texture.
So, but you, a lot of times, will revert into pure fry when you do something like so. If you take that same line and try it.
Well, if I do that, I would do it more that way because it sounds more natural. It blends.
It's not going to
if
sound
you cut
as
off
cut and
and
dry.
disengage totally, it's going to sound a little awkward. But so I'll use the fry technique, and then I'll like fluctuate that, and I'll move from like maybe a lower into a high, just to make the part more dynamic, so I'm not just like sitting in this area.
So you would be kind of, when you're approaching arranging and stuff, you'd almost be in like fry mode for a section of phrases or whatever. But when you are doing like the pitch screaming or false chord, we'll call it pitch screaming, that's much easier than to transition between singing and really aggressive singing, because you've always got that note
The placement
accessible.
is kind of the same. It's just a lot more compression, a lot more air.
So show us the, like if you were to take that and the mind, put that in your voice. Let's hear you do that.
Do it again.
And the might! And the
right. I mean, it sounds very similar. Just the voice coming through is different.
It's
but
a unique.
if you did that solely in Fry, earn the mind.
Okay.
Like now it's more of just pure texture.
There's not as much dynamics.
Not
going
really a
on
pitch
there.
going on.
Even if you, because that was kind of a growly sound. What if you started with like a and the fully engaged pitch, and then went on Fry to mind?
You can do that, but where he's sort of leaning into the abrasiveness of it, you're going to hear a very drastic difference.
It's going to be cut like two techniques.
And the mind!
Yeah.
And it
You
works,
can't,
but what's
really
better?
ease into it. It just has to be like, okay, we're transitioning
You're going,
from this field to that
you're
field.
You're moving the
different
vibration
techniques.
so far, and
Yeah.
he's slowly moving back. Whereas I'm back, all the way back.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so this is really cool. So because you listen to guys like Chester Bennington, who have these like wicked long screams, and Given Up, you've got that 17-second thing, and you see a lot on YouTube, oh, that's a Fry scream, and when you solo that out.
No, there's a note. There's a note.
I don't think Chester's doing any Fries.
He's clearly changing notes. It's switching notes. Like you can't do that with a Fry screen.
Right.
You'll just hear the register sort of change, like, "Ow!" Like that's what you'd hear.
Whereas the Chester,
Yay!
That's a Fry, that's a false chord screen.
Yep.
And the same thing that we've talked about before in the note roasting idea, that is not transitioning into a Fry scream. That is transitioning into a pitched scream, right? Where we're taking a note, hey, have a little bit of heat on it, hey, and to use your terminology, we're bringing the sensation back, hey.
That very clear note is still there. You can hear it.
Yeah, you're resonating at the same pitch the entire time, and you're fluctuating the vibration forward and backward.
And that's how guys like like the Audio Slave era Chris Cornell, you won't feel a thing. You hear the note in there at the same time. And if you are thinking about that in terms of Fry scream, then you're not going to be able to get there because your primary chords are engaged. Am I thinking about that in the right way?
It's certainly not going to sound like that. That pitch is going to be absent.
Oh, that's such a clarifying way, I think, to blend what's out there terminology-wise with
so it's always
what's practically.
when it's a Fry, there's never a note there.
Yeah. There's never a note there, and it's not something that when we hear these guys like Chester or Cornell or even you guys doing these transitions from singing to really broken up screaming, we're not going from singing to Fry scream. We might have Fry sections of a verse or whatever, but that delineation, that's powerful.
And you
for
can
me.
do it. You can go from a Fry into a singing just a actual pitch, a clean pitch if you want to. But in these terms, that's not what we're talking about. It's doable. I've done it. I would continue to do it. But you're really fluctuating that vibration. You're like skipping over. There's this gap. You're going from here to here instead of going like this.
Awesome, guys. Let's do some questions.
Sure.
See what's going on with how people are thinking about this stuff. We are now open for questions. I'm just going to read some comments until we get some more in. And remember, this particular Q&A section is going to be a little shorter because we went a little longer dialogue-wise. But on the end of the last session, or the next session, there's going to be more time for Q&A. The dialogue section between us is going to be less, and there's going to be more time for Q&A. So keep that in mind. If your questions don't get answered in this particular session, write them down, keep them handy, and we'll be engaging with those more the next time. I hear you. I have a soundproof room, so I have no excuses. Okay, just talking about reacting to someone else's comment. Oh, you can transition more smoothly, going from clean singing and then false chord screaming. That demo was really good. Yeah, that eye-opening for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. Chris's scream is very distinct. You can hear it. You can hear it's his immediately. I mean, I feel that way about about everybody's.
us.
I mean, it's like you said, when you're putting that note in,
That's your voice. That's
Yeah.
Exactly.
your voice is coming through. Same general vocal anatomy, but
Different tone.
And it makes sense. Like if everybody close your eyes and I'm talking versus Spencer versus you, it's all very different. And why wouldn't the voices be different? Plus, we're utilizing the techniques in very different ways. Having trouble going from relaxed fry to a loud fry. So, see, it seems difficult.
Core.
Yeah, core.
It's from the core, not here. So if you're starting, this area is very relaxed. You want to keep it that way. Allow the air to come from here. So I'm pushing harder. You're flexing your abs more to get that power.
Okay, awesome. Can you maybe do a quick way on how to get to the fry scream?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it before, but again, start with like a sound effect and just like if you want to do maybe a high, start there, and then you add that core power into it.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I felt like there was a little bit of a note in there, but
So start with something simple, just figure out how to create that texture in general.
So in that, what you just did there, that was pure vocal fry, as a ear, nose, and throat specialist would define it. When we are doing the that is vocal fry plus false chord engagement. That's important to remember. Regular fry will never get loud. You have to insert that false chord engagement in order for it to get loud.
And that's something I didn't even know.
So be thinking about that, because that's the number one hiccup. You have to feel that transition of it's not just pushing harder on this sound and sensation. It's not. If I do that, I get my note comes in,
fry
right?
goes away.
Yeah, because my primary chords are truly engaging because of the more pressure. We have to make that transition to rocking higher in our throat and engaging those false chords. Think about it that way in terms of height. It's like I'm pulling too much weight once I've started singing heavy. Getting stuck in that raspy heavy singing, transitioning from heavy singing into higher mixed voice is very tricky.
Focus on the compression. Like I'll give you an example right now where I'll start on a more pure note, push into that, and then pull it back.
Okay.
And just picture how I'm easing and leaning into the compression more. Hey! Coming from right here, right? Because you're staying on the same note. This isn't really changing much.
Yeah.
It is raising and dropping a bit, but less than you'd think.
But what also is happening is that tongue placement is changing suddenly.
Yeah.
So that's how you're bringing the vibration back. You can't change the vibration with your core. It's got to be with what I refer to a lot as the frame, the shape of the jaw and the tongue.
Very good.
So I guess me leaning into that compression I'm just
It's
doing
going to
that
get louder.
automatically.
But yeah, what you don't realize is that you're actually manipulating the shape of the frame.
Okay,
right
cool,
here.
cool.
So, and I think it's also important to just kind of realize that we're using compression or airflow moderation the entire time, right? When you are that high on a clean note, but it's powerful like that, there's compression going on. I mean, like, and compression meaning that lifting something heavy and holding back that air, right? It's about getting this placement, like you've talked about, combined with the airflow moderation to get even the clean sound, right?
Yeah, even falsetto, you want your core engaged. Still fully engaged at the core.
Yeah, more compressed, right? Yeah, and then even more compressed, but a higher based compression. And then when you do that, you're moderating the way you place that compression at the same time.
Yeah, that's essentially, if you were to move into falsetto from there, your core is doing it's functioning the same way.
It's just your moderating
vibration changes the placement of it.
Okay, nice. So good.
How to fight engaging chords too much in the high false chord screams. I always end up using too much tone underneath, like a rock scream with lots of heat. So how to get that note buried.
So do the exercise we were doing before where you're just fluctuating back and forth, just even simply to understand what motion creates what movement of the vibration. So what's likely happening is you're kind of getting stuck in this area that's giving you like this weird tone, weird texture, and you probably need to breach that area and go a little bit further back. But you have to understand how to move forward and back in order to get it to go further back for you.
Oh, very good. This is a good one here. A comment more so, but you can address this. I've already started losing range just attempting this stuff.
You need a break. Yeah, you need to stop for a couple days.
That's your voice getting worn out.
Couple days. Not a couple minutes, and then try again after the session.
No. Once you know, because it's not coming back today.
You need some sleep.
Yeah, you can't like power your way through it. That wear and tear is there. And think of it as like you just had all these micro tears from lifting weights. You're not going to lift your way to heal those. You're not going to keep lifting weights.
You're not going to go back that evening and try it again either.
Yeah.
You know,
you're only going to get weaker at this point.
Definitely drink a lot of water too. Like
Certainly,
water will help your voice get back into better shape quicker, for sure.
Oh, so good. What's the easiest way to start false chord style? So we just talked about the easiest way to get into the fry style. All my screams are fry, and I don't really know how to start engaging that other style.
Try the hey thing.
The hey, yeah.
Hey!
Yep.
Hey! Hey!
So
Yay!
that personality is there from the beginning. It's like you're adding the false chord on top.
Think about
of your voice.
Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh yeah! That's what it is.
Think about sounds in the real world too. If you're having a hard time even just doing the hey, because that might not be easy for you, create a buzzer sound. There's a very good chance you know how to create some sort of real world sound that has a pitch and a gritty texture. Right? Sounds silly, but it's a great way of understanding where's my body placing that resonation.
Yeah, that's good.
The other thing is like do the Dragon Ball Z like rage buildup. Where you start with just your normal voice, like just a breath out, and then you build that aggression, or like the angsty teenager, come on, Dad! You know, just weird stuff that's natural to you that you know how to do already, and then with mixing that with the exercises of, again, forward and backward manipulation of the placement is going to help you really hone in on it.
One of the things that's helped me is to take some of those things that you just said, like, come on, Dad, and imitate vastly different characters and personalities. Mm-hmm. So, you might have the wimpy, prepubescent, come on, Dad, where you're cracking a little bit. And how does that feel? How does that, and then maybe the slightly more confident whine, come on, Dad, come on. But then you have the more like, I'm gonna beat my dad up. Come on, Dad, come on. Yeah. And really doing those sounds, but not stopping at just doing, but trying to make it so that you are paying careful attention to what you're doing, and then comparing it to what you're saying about, okay, where is it here? Where is it here? What kind, where is my falsetto? Where's my head voice? Come on, Dad! Okay, in that, I just did a lot of different things.
And you fluctuated from forward to back is what you did.
Yeah. And being able to place those things dynamically, even within the same phrase, is going to help you get into things on command. Whereas if you're just going for one type of sound, I think this is a huge thing. If you are going for one type of sound and you're honing in too long on one type of sound in a practice session, A, you're going to burn yourself out really fast. B, you're not going to really understand how to get into it. You might understand, like, in that moment how to get into it, but really understanding how to move between these different sounds and sensations
how to utilize that spectrum that you have there. Yep. So I kind of describe it as like start with where you're successful and move into that area. So that way you're not just getting stuck here, or you're not just failing and, like he said, just burning yourself out right away. Start with success. Force yourself to succeed, and then utilize that knowledge and the mechanics that you already have to generate something new, what you're trying to get into, what that final goal is. But yeah, you want to be able to utilize the spectrum of each dynamic instead of just hitting it this one way every single time.
Oh, that's great. All right. Guys, we're going to take a break in advance of the final session. In the next section, we are going to be talking a lot more about practicing, daily, weekly, minutely, and we've touched on that some in this session, but we're going to revisit that. And then there's going to be a much longer Q&A section in the next one. So we'll be back at 12:30 Mountain Time. That's in about 20 minutes from now. The countdown will start before, giving you guys a good chance to kind of get in the room and talk a little bit, and then we'll start shortly after that. So thank you so much for your questions. If we didn't get to it, write it down, create a little memo for yourself, and ask it again in the next section. That's why we've created this third section for you. Thank you so much for being engaged. Thank you guys for another great session, and we'll see you in just a little bit.
Nice.